September 14th email, it states the changes made to the CIA talking points still, and I quote, "don't resolve all of my issues or those of my building leadership." Can you just tell me who that building leadership was, who you're referring to there?
With regard to building leadership, I was concerned that all of my bosses at the policy level needed to look at these to see if they agreed with me.
Were there particular people that were concerned about the changes that weren't being made?
Our regular procedure, when I, as spokesperson, could not solve an issue at my level, was to send my concerns up to the Deputy Chief of Staff for Policy. That's what I did that night. I did not consult with anybody else.
And that person is?
At the time, that was Jake Sullivan.
Simply on the basis of what Ambassador Rice has publicly disclosed, does the United States government regard what happened in Benghazi as an act of terror?
Again, I'm not going to put labels on this until we have a complete investigation, okay?
So you don't regard it as an act of terrorism?
I don't think we know enough. I don't think we know enough.
What was the purpose of the CIA annex in Benghazi?
Senator, I would be delighted to talk to you about the relationship between the State Department and the CIA in a separate setting, if that's helpful.
There are many of us who believe that it had to do with an arms trade going out of the CIA annex, and that perhaps people were unhappy about arms being taken from one group to another and sent to another that may have incited the rioting and may have incited the terrorist attack. But the problem is we can't ever get to the truth because people just say, oh, it's secret.
In the vacuum of this, as we're getting this testimony today on this confirmation hearing, there's a new book that's coming out in the fall. There are several new books coming out in the fall, some of them from survivors who have not talked because they've signed book deals. One of them called Under Fire, The Untold Story of the Attack in Benghazi. James Rosen reported this earlier this week. Just some quotes that puts this all in context from people who were there about the enemy attacking the so-called protesters. Quote, "They were not members of a ragtag force split into small groups which advanced throughout the compound methodically. They employed military-style hand signals to direct their progression toward their objectives." Continuing, "They had been given precise orders and impeccable intelligence. They seemed to know when, where, and how to get from the access points to the ambassador's residence and how to cut off the agents, the defense agents, as well as the local guard force and the February 17th Martyrs Brigade militiamen on duty that night." And finally, "But one thing was absolutely certain in the minds of each and every one of the agents in those early and crucially decisive moments, that the U.S. ambassador, the personal representative of President Barack Obama, was the ultimate target of the attack. They knew that they had to secure him and get him out of the kill zone." That is from the book, just excerpts coming out this fall.
Look, it tells you how radically untrue was what Susan Rice was peddling on the Sunday shows. And the question is, I mean, this has been, the mainstream press has tried to sort of wave away the damning evidence in the emails and how the talking points were compiled by dismissing it as a turf war between CIA and state. But that, I think, is completely wrong. A turf war is when one side or another in a government is trying to aggrandize itself, wants to get more authority and power. It's about territory. There's never an initial principle at stake. Here, what was at stake in state arguing with the CIA was who was responsible for a real scandal, the dereliction and not providing support, ignoring the warnings, and doing nothing during the hours of the attack. So it wasn't an argument between the departments over simply authority. It was over who was involved in the scandal, who should have taken the hit. And in the end, the one decision all the departments agreed on was to try to absolve the Obama administration in all the agencies of any blame by pretending that it was not a terror attack and it was the fault of a nobody, a Christian Coptic from Egypt who had done a film and who is the only person right now who is in jail as a result of this event.
It is a disturbing trend, Mr. President, when Republicans are willing to block executive branch nominees even if they have no objection about the qualification of the nominee. They don't like the law. They don't like the agency. Instead, they're blocking qualified nominees to circumvent the legislative process, force wholesale changes to laws, or restructure entire executive branch departments.
And it's noteworthy that all of the people he's complaining about all got confirmed. So what he's really saying here is you don't want any debate at all in connection with presidential appointments. Just sit down, shut up, and rubber stamp everything, everyone the president sends up here.
Republicans say that this is manufactured because of all the cloture votes they've moved forward, only a few have resulted in the nominees actually being pulled, like not getting through. Once they do the cloture, right. Eventually when the vote happens, it's overwhelming that the president does get his guy in.
Yeah. I'm not just going to have a practical effect in this administration, but if Harry Reid wants to drop the big one, go ahead, Harry. I think the judge is absolutely right. They will rue the day. One day, Republicans are going to be in office, and they're going to use this. I mean, as you said, this is a classic study in hypocrisy, because all the arguments were made about 7, 8 years ago in the Senate, and the players are reversed. The jerseys are of a different color. It's the same argument. I could live with it either way. I think, as Mara says, this is not all-out nuclear war. Tactical nuclear war only, because it only applies to presidential appointments. I think it's kind of reasonable. But one day, when the Republicans use it on the Democrats and they reverse all their arguments, it'll be remembered who did it. And I think they will have no one to blame except themselves.
This has been a Sunfish production.